listen to this episode if you are looking forward to your 2025 and you're planning and you really are looking for direction and support in how to do it, some common mistakes and different frameworks of how to plan your 2025 to be, of course, your best year yet. I'm so excited about this. I am really passionate about planning in business. When we talk about like this freepreneur lifestyle, which is my major framework, is having a business full of balance and harmony and like really to build out your really full life and then have a business that fits into that and allows you to afford a really full life and all of those different wonderful things. One of the major pieces that allows people to live a more freedom-filled life is planning, is organization, is structure. Where there's balance, there must be structure somewhere because business does take structure, business does take plans, business does take organization, so we can be more efficient, more effective, and really just execute things in a better way throughout. So I am really regimented with my planning schedule. Really love doing some yearly planning. Of course, I'm not really fully into all of the astrology stuff, but I have been told I am a Virgo and I am quite Virgo when it comes to structure and planning and things like that in my business. So if you're here and you're like, all right, you're like looking at all of your plans of 2025 and you're like, yeah, how am I going to do that? Or maybe you're looking at it, you're like, all right, these seem pretty similar to last year's and I spent all year trying to figure out how I was going to do that and it still didn't happen. Or maybe you're like, all right, like, can I actually execute all of that? Is this looking a little bit too big? Is this not enough? Or, that seems like a lot to execute in 12 months, but you're excited about it and you really want to do it. It's really good to look at the new year as a fresh start, especially because in the product-based world, we have the holidays, the end of the year. You kind of get to finish strong. It's kind of like the Super Bowl. You get to take a week, maybe two, take a big deep breath after the holiday season because you're like, holy cow, as you're listening to this is coming out on December 27th. You did such a great job over the holiday season. If nobody's told you that yet, it can feel like a lot. And so now you're looking forward. You're like, all right, you're able to take a beat after you had to ship all this stuff out and you're selling for weeks. And now you're looking for some direction and support. So that's what we're going to talk about today. First, I want to really cover some major mistakes that people have when they look at planning, yearly planning, and really just planning in general. And then we're going to talk about kind of what my overall framework is for yearly planning if you want to do that as well. If you're new here, hello. I'm Madison Page. This is the Small Business Growth Podcast. We really chat about how to build a freedom-filled life and a business that stands out and sells out online by building a ride or die community around your brand. And we talk all things marketing, business growth, and really just how to structure your life and build kind of that dream business, but also have a life that is full outside of it. We put out new episodes every Tuesday and Friday. So if you don't subscribe, because I know so many people that are listening at the beginning of the year are going to be searching things up. If you don't subscribe yet, make sure you do. We have a lot coming out and it has been so humbling looking at the numbers from this last 2024 year. We were in the top 2% of listened podcasts in the world. I can't believe you guys sit here and listen to my little Midwest accent that much. I love it and I wouldn't change anything. So without further ado, let's hop on in. First things first is that when we look at planning, I really want you to not just sit down and be like, all right, like, what am I doing? I want you to really look at the facts of what worked this last year. This is where data really comes into play. I think a lot of people sit down when they really look at their business and they're like, okay, like from my own feelings, my own emotions, where do I really want to be? And what do I want to do? And what do I want to change without actually looking at the facts of what was working, what didn't work, what were our best sellers and all of that. I really think a key part of looking forward is also looking back. So you'll see my first step in yearly planning is reflecting, looking at what worked this last year, but it's not just like let me just like reflect in my brain of what I think worked or what I think didn't work. Because a lot of times when I actually look at people's numbers, when I actually look at people's websites, their analytics, their social content, and we start to identify what content was working, what content wasn't working, it's very different than what they actually thought. They'd be like, wow, like I didn't realize that, this product sold just as much as that other product. Here, I thought this other product was my only bestseller, and they actually have two. Or maybe, I didn't realize that many people were coming to my website and not actually converting, and our conversion rate was so low. Maybe we need to figure something out there. So I call this looking at facts over feelings when it comes to pretty much anything and any business decision, because things can feel very emotional in business for us. It's like what we want to do. B, it can be just like, oh, this is, I'm in my business every day, so obviously I know everything that's happening. Instead, we want to look at the actual facts. So I want you to look at your website analytics. I want you to look at your sales analytics. I want you to look at your social media analytics and say, this is the content that's working. This is the content that is leading to website clicks. This is the content that's leading to profile visits. So you can then go and say, okay, I'm trying to grow my audience. Let's look at the content that I created last year that actually helped me grow my audience, and let's create more of that. You have to be able to look at your data and be able to find facts of what's actually happening. When we are looking at feelings of just like, a hunch, we are kind of like assuming that was something that worked. And I think even myself in my business, I can say, oh, like that content performs really well. And then I go and I'm like, but it's not my highest performing content. Really interesting. And I'm kind of a little bit of a data nerd, but you really should be able to look at your data. And if you don't look at your data ever, this is a good time of year to do it, is at the end of a year, at the beginning of the year, and really being able to look back, because you have a lot of data, especially because the last 3 months were the holidays. You probably had an increase in people on your website. You had an increase in sales. So you're really able to get better, like higher numbers, and see how people really performed. So a mistake that people make in yearly planning is never actually reflecting by looking at the facts over feelings there. You really do need to be able to look at your analytics and really be able to analyze and what that really looks like. Just because something isn't working, it doesn't mean that it's the obvious thing that isn't working. So I had somebody in my DMs a couple weeks ago, and it's really common, is they're like, Maddie, I didn't make a single online sale all year long. I don't know why. I am posting my content every single day. I'm doing the thing. I have my website out there. So I revamped my website and people still aren't buying. And you might be out there and you'll be like, oh, was that me? And it probably wasn't, because I have this happen a lot, right? There's so many people that come to me that are like, Maddie, I never get sales on my website. So I redid my website and people still aren't buying. That doesn't mean that your website is what's broken. Your website is the final kind of end of the buying cycle. It might be your marketing, it might be your content, it might be your audience. It might not be the end game of what you think. Just because no one's buying doesn't mean it's your website. I have clients that like their website is like slightly brutal, right? Like their website is like a little tricky to actually go all the way through, but because their community, like their website isn't perfect by any means. It's easy enough to get them to check out. However, their community is strong enough. Their community will go through that dang website. If your marketing is good enough, your website, as long as it's functional, as long as people can figure it out on their own, they will buy, they will purchase. A lot of times your website is not the issue. Can we make tweaks and adjustments on your website to actually make it convert higher? Of course, yes. But if you are making no sales or few sales, a lot of times it's not like, oh man, I need a new website. When we're really looking at what we need, we have to be able to, again, this comes back to numbers and really understanding if we can identify where a sales breakdown is. But just because the end game isn't working doesn't mean it's the thing that is obvious that's actually not working. And this brings me to, you don't know what you don't know. There are so much in business that you might not know is actually the reason that something isn't working. It might be your marketing. It might be your content. It might be your Instagram stories. I had somebody that did a VIP strategy week with me this last week, and we sat down and she was like, Maddie, I just feel like I have a good size audience. Nobody's really converting. My stories just feel kind of stale. And I'm like, okay, well, like, what is your Instagram story strategy? And she said, well, I do this, I do that, and I do this other thing every single day. I was told that this is like a framework I should be following. I should be doing this every day. I said, yeah, but your audience, like, how long have you been doing that? And she said for a while, like every day, this is the kind of the structure she tries to keep because she was told that that's a structure that converts really highly. And that may have worked a while ago. That may have worked the first 10 times you did it, the first 20 times you did it. But if you do that every single day, people will numb that out. And she was like, wow, I never thought about that. So I said, why don't we reframe that? Here's 7 different ways that you can still get that same strategy across. And why don't we structure those out? Why don't we look at that and reframe it? That was something she was like, wow, I seriously did not know that that was a problem that I had. I knew that the symptom I was seeing was that my stories felt stale. Nobody was really watching it. My views kind of like have tanked. And, but I didn't really know what the overall problem was. And it was just one of those pieces is you don't know what you don't know. And if you look at like the 4 phases of learning, they're really complex, like so unnecessarily complex. It starts with unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. Basically, unaware, aware, learning, mastery, right? So unaware, there's a lot of things in your business that you might be unaware are even there. Like you don't know what you don't know. And so there is a piece of getting an outside eye, asking some friends, really talking with them, or like having somebody like me or having somebody that really understands business to be able to identify some of those pieces. Sometimes when we are looking at, like if you were a part of my 2025 planning session that I did with my audience, one of the major pieces was, what do we need to learn in order to make this happen? Like, this is where looking at the facts, there is a breakdown here. And then you're saying, okay, what's not working? It feels like my website, but let me keep kind of digging deeper. What I ask them is, what do they have to learn in order to get to that next step? So understanding that there are always going to be gaps in our own knowledge. Every single person out there, business is a completely new knowledge base. And when you're building a new website or when you're growing on social media, you're trying to get onto Amazon or your SEO, it's a totally new skill set in all of these different areas. If you really think about it, like a corporate company has a full SEO team, has a full social media, has a full Twitter, it has a full Instagram team, Facebook team, like all of these other individual teams. And it's because they are completely different skill sets. So we as an entrepreneur, as most of you probably have, it's just you, or maybe you have a small team, we have to wear a lot of hats. So there's a lot of different pieces that we do have to know. And the next thing is so we kind of talked about data analytics. We talked about just because it feels like it's something, it feels like it's the end game, it feels like it's your website that can't be converting, there might be a different gap that's before that. Business grows on top of each other. It's why my frameworks are the way that they are. If we, pillars, presence, people, and profit is what we teach inside of Product to Profit, is pillars is your like concrete elements of your business. It's all about like your branding, your ideal customer, your foundation, your differentiator, your values, who your business is. If you don't have that, it's going to be really hard to talk about content. It's going to be really hard to create content. So we have to kind of build it in that, and it has to go a certain kind of in that framework in order to make sure everything is very structured. The next thing when we talk about business planning is, again, one of the major questions in my planning session that I did with some people a couple of weeks ago is sometimes we do have to evolve personally before we can evolve professionally. And before you're like, Maddie, this is getting a little woo-woo, just get to the dang strategy. I'm with you, right? I am a strategy forward person. I'm somebody that like really loves a strategy. And honestly, if you would have talked to me a year ago, I would have said, like pish posh to the mindset stuff. Just give me the strategy and tell me the gaps that I have to fill. And I have gone through mindset programs this year. I have talked to a lot of people about different mindset things. And I found that there were mindset gaps that I was not ready to grow to different levels because I had not become the person that can actually do that yet. I didn't overcome my own negative blocks, my own insecurities, my own whatever it may be, in order to actually become that higher level version of myself, that most like freedom filled person of myself. So sometimes there are personal things that we have to be able to overcome and accomplish in order to become our highest self, in order to become that most successful person. It might be perfectionism. It might be imposter syndrome. It might be, showing my face. It might be all of these different pieces that you might like. Those mindset blocks are of you, nobody wants to see my personal life, or nobody cares to see my face online, or, this can't go out yet because it's not perfect. All of those things are mindset blocks that are holding you back in order from actually taking the proper strategic action. And sometimes we have to personally become something. It's not a different person, but personally evolve, and then we can evolve our business as well. So don't just plan strategically when we look at yearly planning. I do think something that is really good is thinking about, okay, this is the yearly planning that I want to have. This is the year that I want to have. Now, what person lives the life that I want to live? What habits does that person have, and how can I start implementing them, like, in marginally every week or every month? Or how can I add little bits and pieces of that person into my schedule right now to be able to become that person sooner? What habits do they have? What are they doing? And sometimes we have to check our biases there as well. Like for me, I'm somebody that, just because of my past, sometimes I still equate business growth with like needing to be incredibly structured and working 12-hour days. So if I sat down a year ago and like worked out, what is my multi-millionaire self, I would have sat down and I would have like said, she wakes up at 5 a.m. and she's working by 9. She already has a workout in and she's doing all of these things and boom, 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 boom. However, that's not a life I want to live, right? And so I had to sit down and like check my own bias there of like, no, Maddie, you don't have to work that hard. Does your like best life look like? What does your best life look like? And how can I build the business around that? Because we aren't building a business to then like filter in life. We're building a life and having a business that works with the life that we have. The next one is that people often plan more than they actually can do. If you look at it, like look at your weeks, you're like, okay, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do this other thing and I'm going to revamp my website and I'm going to order new packaging and I want to launch this other product. And especially right now, we all have like big goals. What I really like to have is have 1 or 2 major goals for the entire year. I like to have like a theme for the year. In 2024, my word was structure. I wanted to structure everything, have funnels, have systems, have more structure in my business, so it allowed me to actually enjoy my life a little bit more. My word was structure this next year. My word is expansion. I want to expand in a lot of different ways. I structured everything and I got myself set up. So throughout the year, I was like, does this build into my overall goal of structure? And now I can look forward and say, okay, does this decision move into my overall goal of expansion? So I like to have 1 or 2 kind of major themes for the year, and then I break down what the goals are in between there. And so I can say, okay, if my overall goal is expansion, maybe that's talking about how can I expand my audience? How can I expand my product suite? How can I expand my podcast listeners? How can I expand my delivery? There's so many different pieces that go into that, but that is my overall goal. So I like to have this one kind of overarching theme for the year that this time next year, where do I want to feel? How do I want to feel like I have grown this year? Is I want to feel like my business expanded. This past year, I wanted to feel like I got more structured, more organized, and things a little bit more seamless, like things kind of seamlessly were selling a little bit better. And I have a team, I have systems, I have automations, I've like implemented using Notion, which I love. I have so much more organization in my business. And now I'm able to go forward and expand knowing that I have the structure in place in order to withstand it. So I like to have kind of this one major goal and then break them down. We're going to get into what my framework is here in just one more point, but I do want to make one more last point here. Is I don't want you to plan your entire year too closely. I think a major mistake that I see people make, and honestly, the only mistake that it really is you disappoint yourself and it's a waste of time, is that you sit down and you plan out your entire year, every single launch that you want to do, every single goal, your months, like every single month and what the goals are for those months and what you're going to do and the objectives that you have to cause in order to get there. That is getting way too into the nitty gritty. What happens in December of 2025 is none of my business quite yet. Like seriously, none of my business. Who knows what's going to happen in June, July, and August? I have already made some crazy things happen in Q1 of 2025 that I am so excited about that might open up doors in a totally new area that I have never even thought would be. And I can't predict what's going to happen in July, in August, in October, December of next year. December of 2025 is none of my business except where do I want to be and working my way backwards. And so what I don't want you to do is plan out exact objectives and exact tasks and exact goals of income and all of that for every single individual month. That gets to be a little too nitty gritty. What I really like to do, and this is moving into what my overall planning framework is for 2025, is really starting at that broad overview. Again, we want to reflect on this last year, look at the facts, look at your data, look at what actually worked as well as what you feel like worked, and then look at the next year where do you want to be this time next year? So when I said none of my business, it really is more of just looking forward to the vision. What do you want to feel this time next year? And that's the only piece that you really care about. Where do you want your business to be? And then we work backwards of what your overall year kind of looks like. I don't want you to get too nitty-gritty planned for the entire year because things change, people change. You all of a sudden might go viral in April and then your entire year plan is totally squashed. Or you are, and I think it's good to look ahead, but what I like to do is plan loosely the year and then plan quarterly and get a little bit more, because those are things you can look 3 months ahead and be like, all right, this is where I feel like I'm going to be in 3 months. And who knows, that might even change, but I think 3 months is a better looking forward objective, better than 6, 8, 12 months ahead. That is, again, none of my business. So some of the major mistakes to recap is I want you to definitely don't miss looking at your data analytics for the year. Look at the facts. Don't just look at the feelings. Just because something isn't working at the end of it doesn't mean that it's actually the end of the process that isn't working. It doesn't mean that it's actually the obvious. If your content, like people come to me all the time and they're like, Maddie, my content isn't resonating. And I'm like, okay, great. Like I look at their content and it isn't a content problem. It's a foundations problem. Their business is too broad. Their audience is too broad. They're not speaking to anybody. And I'm like, well, hey, what's your differentiator? And they're like, okay, like I've been really thinking about this and I don't know. And I'm lacking a lot of clarity. And where you lack clarity, your audience feels it tenfold. So a lot of times it's not actually a content problem. It's a foundations of your business problem. So we actually have to look a lot deeper. And there's a lot out there that you might not know right now. Again, in those phases of learning, unaware, aware, learning, and mastery, the unaware stage, there is so much out there you don't know. If I were to ask you right now, like, how do you play cribbage, which is like a card game that people always play and I never understand. It might be a Midwest thing. So if it is and you have no idea, think of it like whatever, it's a card game, right? There are so many dang rules to cribbage. I have no idea how to do it. I am completely unaware. I'm completely unaware. I could not sit down and just be like, okay, let me figure this out. I'm completely unaware to all of those rules. It's something I have no idea on. If I were to sit down and grab a guitar right now, I am completely unaware. I would go boing, 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 and it would sound terrible and like looks good. I would pretend I'm like rocking out on this guitar and it would sound awful. Like it's because I am unaware of where to put my fingers, unaware of how to play a song, what a chord is, how to read music. I do actually know how to read music a little bit. I took piano lessons for about 6 years as a kid. Can't play a single song. And that's on me being a business person and not a musician. So there's all of these things that we are completely unaware of out there. Again, if I were to grab, like, I think a good analogy here is if you were to say, all right, I want to make a chocolate cake, and you don't have the recipe, you are unaware of how to make that full chocolate cake. You can guess and you can throw some stuff in a bowl, hope that it works, and it turns out not exactly how you want it to go. But if you do, like there are recipes out there, there are people that can help you kind of find those different pieces. You sometimes have to evolve personally before we can evolve our actual business. There's mindset blocks make a really big difference in how we actually execute. So don't miss out on figuring out your habits, your mindset blocks, things that you want to change in your life and in your overall like structure in your schedule in order to change kind of your reality in your business. People often plan more than they can actually do because we have high expectations for ourselves. Again, you're just setting yourself up for disappointment. Think of that overall goal, and then every decision that you make either moves you closer or further away from that goal. And then don't plan the entire year too closely. Look at your overall goal and kind of go from there. So now, just to give you an overview of how I really like to plan, first things first is reflection. Again, looking at the data and reflecting on how you feel first. And then I like to go and look at the data, look at your best sellers, look at how people were buying, really analyze some of those KPIs, the key performance indicators, and reflect and really look at the data and say, okay, what do I feel like didn't work? And what are the facts there? What are the facts that did work, didn't work? And how are you going to integrate that into your plan? It might really help you gauge your content, which content really works. worked. If you're looking at your website, what website really, like what are your website elements that really worked, and all of that. This is something we do inside of PTP, or Product Sales Expansion, both of my live programs, because it's really important. All of my clients, we really want to dive into their data. And if you're like, Maddie, I don't have any data, nobody was really on my website, my content isn't really working, we need to again go back and look at why that might be. What are some of those pieces? The next is vision. So we now looked back, now we want to look forward from where we are and say, this time next year, or even 3 years from now, where do I want to be? Who is that person? How can I become that person? Again, you're looking at your next year you in December. Where is she? What does she feel like? How does she act? What is her habits like? How much money is she making? What does her business look like? And like, think big in the best world possible. If you've never read the book, 10X is the new 2X. Think of your 10X self. Basically, to sum up the book, is instead of trying to like 2X your business, try to 10X your business. It's kind of like the shoot for the stars. And if you land them, or if you shoot for the moon and if you land them on the stars, it's okay. It's like whatever that phrase is. It's that same thing. Shoot for the moon and if you land them among the stars. So shoot for 10X. And if you land at 2X, that's still awesome. Think much bigger than you think. Who is that person? What objectives are they doing? And how can you kind of embody that? What are their habits? And then how do we work backwards in order to be at that point at the end of the year strategically as well? So we're constantly balancing kind of that mindset, the feeling versus the fact, the mindset versus the strategy, because business does take both. Business does take, some people say it's the masculine and the feminine. Some people just say it is the structure and the flow, whatever that feels good for you. So we first reflect, we go a year back. What do we feel like worked well this last year? What do we feel like didn't work well, and what can we change? And then we go a year ahead. Where do we want to be, and how do we make that happen, and what needs to change? What are we sticking with? And then we look at your overall goals. We focus on that major goal, that major kind of word: expansion, audience, sales, structure, like knowledge. What are all of these things that you really want to feel? Like, what is your number one kind of focus, that number one word for the year? And then what do you want your income goal to be? What do you want your impact to be? How do you want to feel as a business owner at that point? And how can we really make that happen? So when we're looking at a yearly goal, yes, we want to look at income. Yes, we want to look at kind of that overall focus. Yes, we want to look at, what is the impact that you want to have? Who do you want to, what message do you really want people to feel? And what do you want your feeling to be like? Again, we're going from strategy to feeling. We're going from income to impact. We're going from focus, feelings, and facts, and all of those things. And then I want you to just skip to Q1, looking at the end of Q4 in December, all where you really want to be in Q1. What are the first steps in order to get there? What are some of the first things that you need to learn? What is the overall focus of those 3 months? What season of business are you in? Are you going to grow? Are you going to nurture? What are you launching? All of those different pieces. And then as you go on, I want you to look at monthly, at weekly, at daily, but you don't have to do that when you're doing yearly planning. Yearly planning really should look like, where do I want to be in December? How do I work my way backwards? What are the objectives that I need to do? Looking at in December of 2025, do you want to have, you want to have $100,000 in sales. You want to have 10,000 followers. You want to expand your product lines. You want to be feeling like this. Now, what does it take in order for me to get there? Do you need to launch a YouTube channel? Do you need to get serious about your content? Did that person, like looking at that person, what did they do in order to get there? A lot of times our intuition knows what we're supposed to say there. That person launched this program. That person learned how to like really build an aesthetic really, really well. That person learned what content really means. That person showed up 3 to 5 times a week on Instagram Reels every single day. That person got over their fear of judgment and really just went all in on it. And then we can start looking backwards and saying, okay, this is who that person is. This is what that person had to do. And now how can I fit that in? What is step 1, 2, and 3 in January, February, and March, and kind of go from there. Then look at Q1. By the end of Q1, you're able to look at Q2 and you can kind of go from there. Some of the major things that I think that's good to really plan out first is, what are your hard selling days? When are you launching? When do you have a sales incentive? When do you have a promo? And then we can kind of go from there. Business planning can feel a little ambiguous. We try to take as much ambiguity out of it it as possible by looking at the facts, looking at your data, looking at your analytics. But there is an element of it is that you are planning for something that you don't know what's going to happen. We have no idea what these next 12 months are going to look like. You could go viral. TikTok could be shut down. TikTok could be totally fine. The economy could be blossoming. You have zero idea what's actually going to happen. You might have an opportunity that comes to you. Anthropology might reach out to you and want your product in their store. Whatever that might be, you might have an incredible opportunity that totally changes the course of the year. So in a perfect world, in the world that you are expecting, where do you want to be? And then look at the facts as to what has been working and how can we actually objectively move forward, hoping that that is where we are going to be. It could be totally you could totally be in left field from where you think you were, but we just want to look at it and take strategic actions on objectives that actually make sense. Don't plan too much, don't plan too little, and find something that works for you. There's going to be a million people telling you how to plan, but you have to make it make sense for you. At the end of the day, you are the business owner. You get to plan as little or as much as you want. You should have some element of a plan. Coming from me, structure is going to allow you to be more efficient. It's going to allow you to be more effective. It's going to allow you to have better time management. It's going to allow you to really reflect on what did work, looking at that data, and be able to take a more educated approach to that growth. And then we can really dive into it and look at kind of the nitty-gritty of what do you need to do. If you are feeling like you have a major knowledge gap somewhere, now is a good time. If you are looking for some support, I would love to support you in the new year. We have both of our live programs starting in Q1. If you are interested in either finally getting 2 consistent sales or scaling into multiple 6 figures in your product-based business, we have different live programs there. We have a lot of different options. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me on Instagram and just DM me support, and we can figure out which option makes the most sense for you. If this was helpful for you, definitely let me know. Come send me a DM on Instagram. I love chatting with you. My handle over there is @thisismadisonpage. Really, business planning comes down to looking at your objectives, looking at the person you want to become, looking at your habits, really reflecting on this last year and being very self-aware of the things you feel like worked, things you feel like didn't work. But if you are looking at this last year saying, Maddie, this next year, I want to do all of these things and I have no idea how I'm going to do that. I'm just going to keep on showing up. And if your objectives look a lot like what you did this last year, maybe it's time to look at a different strategy. Maybe it's time we need to make a major change. When I look at my overall business growth and I look at what my major problems were this last year in business and the areas that I would still like to, develop, I say, okay, Maddie, how long have I been struggling with this one problem, and how long am I willing to keep struggling with it before I actually reach my goal? And most of the time I'm like, I want it to be fixed right now, like literally yesterday if possible. If that's the case, I know I need to make some major changes. I know nothing changes if nothing changes. I know there's a lot of things at the end of the day that as a business owner, we all are completely unaware to because we're in our own business, which is why it's so important to have other people in your business with you. So if you're looking for support, as you know, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram @thisismadisonpage. If that is feeling like you, where you just don't really know where to turn on how to reach these goals, or you might just want a little extra support, you might want to learn a little something and have somebody in your corner, I'm there for that as well. I hope you have a wonderful day. Get out there, start planning, light a candle, get a yummy coffee, play some instrumental covers, and really just have a dreamy day of planning out what your 2025 looks like. I love you. I'm rooting for you. I'm in your corner always. If nobody has told you yet, you absolutely crushed this holiday season. You are exactly where you were supposed to be, and you deserve to take a day or two to literally just chill, or maybe a week or two, okay? The holiday season, a lot of people feel overwhelmed. A lot of people feel scattered. Heck, people feel overwhelmed without running a business and having it be their busiest time of year. You're doing an incredible job. I love you. I'm rooting for you. I'm in your corner always. I will see you in the next episode. Come hang out with me on Instagram @thisismadisonpage. I'll see you there.